The Souls series is a very unique set of games that have carved out their own place in the pantheon of video game history. Because of this, a lot of games have attempted to copy Souls games' style to varying levels of success. From the lackluster Lords of the Fallen to the abhorrent Necropolis, Souls clones never quite hit the mark for some reason. That is, until Nioh came along. Nioh is a third-person action game developed by Team Ninja and published by Koei-Tecmo for the PlayStation 4. It is, in every sense of the word, a Souls clone. However, what makes Nioh stand out from the other Souls clones is the simple fact that Team Ninja understood what made Souls games fun to play. Numerous public tests were run by Team Ninja to ensure that when their game released, it had combat that was almost identical to Souls games. This is the first point I'd like to get into in regards to Nioh and other Souls clone games. The combat in a Souls game is often something people take for granted, because FromSoft has put out many Souls games with each one feeling almost the exact same as its predecessor. But when playing a Souls clone, it just doesn't feel right. In Lords of the Fallen, combat is too weighty, with animations sometimes reaching ludicrous levels of exaggeration. Then in Necropolis, animations are too light and easily interruptible, removing any amount of skill and satisfaction that Souls games offer. Nioh, however, understood that combat is an incredibly important aspect of the game that needs to feel exactly right. Animations need to be fine-tuned, and every weapon should have a distinct feel. Axes need to be heavy and have long, drawn-out animations, whereas katanas should be agile and effective, but they shouldn't have as much of an impact as an axe or a hammer would. The combat in Nioh felt exactly right. The extra time the developers took to ensure that everything felt precisely how they wanted things to feel paid off, as Nioh's combat feels spectacular. This alone sets Nioh apart from the other Souls clones, but it doesn't end just there. Nioh is an evolution of the Souls formula. Instead of having just 2 attacks with 2 different ways to hold a weapon, you're given 3 stances that all play different from one another, with 2 attacks each, and further techniques that can be unlocked during your playtime. Not only that, but Nioh also introduces a new mechanic known as the Ki Pulse. The Ki Pulse is essentially active reload, but for your stamina. How it works is that after every attack, there's a window where you can hit R1 to regain a chunk of ki that you just spent. Later on, you can also upgrade this ability to work when you dodge and also when you switch stances. These 2 mechanics allow Nioh to have extremely engaging combat, and prevented me from getting tired with the combat like I usually do in games such as this. Nioh is almost a blend of a character action game and a Souls game, and the way Nioh utilizes elements from both of those genres was just amazing. As I mentioned earlier, Nioh is an unabashed Souls clone, but Team Ninja took the time and effort to ensure that every mechanic they lifted from the Souls series was implemented in a way that was unique to Nioh. Illusory walls, crystal lizards, bloodstains, and Estus flasks are all present in Nioh. However, Team Ninja didn't just copy and paste these mechanics from Dark Souls. Instead, they took the time and effort to attempt to expand upon the initial ideas borrowed from the Souls series. Illusory walls are no longer things that you walk up to and smack, but instead they're wall-shaped monsters that will let you by if you do the correct emote towards them. Crystal lizards are here as well, but instead of them being tiny enemies that you have 10 seconds to kill, they're pesky tanks that scurry around the level, leading you into potentially dangerous situations. Nioh's entire MO was to borrow ideas from Souls games and expand upon them. Nioh is so much more than just a clone, but instead a natural evolution of the genre that only a fresh set of eyes could have led to. Of course, Nioh isn't just repurposed ideas from other games. It brought its own fair share of interesting concepts to this genre, my favorite being the loot system. Loot in this game is almost entirely randomized. Every single piece of gear you get will be different from your last. This kept itemization fresh and interesting in a way that Souls games were never quite able to achieve. Every time a new axe dropped, I was giddy with excitement because of the neat stats that it could have. It's a very simple solution to the issue that Souls games have, where you find a weapon and a set of armor you like, and you stick with those for the entire game. In Nioh, I went from heavy samurai armor with a dinky axe to light ninja garb with a one-of-a-kind katana, while experimenting with everything in between thanks to this gear system. It was incredibly refreshing to actually be excited about gear for once in a game like this. Another interesting take that Nioh opts for is the inclusion of a mission system instead of a wide open world. However, what I enjoyed most about this new system were the submissions. Not only did they refashion existing maps in enjoyable ways, but they also offered a lot of unique and interesting missions that were a nice change of pace from the main story missions. I was incredibly surprised to learn that a large chunk of these submissions were just straight up arenas where you would fight either a single difficult boss or a wave of enemies. These submissions were a greatly appreciated feature to the game, and I found myself enjoying them quite a bit. I really can't stress enough about how refreshing this entire game was. Honestly, after 5 Souls games, I was extremely tired of anything to do with the Souls formula, but Nioh innovated on the series in a way that was remarkably rejuvenating. However, no game is without flaws. Nioh's biggest issue is sacrificing enjoyment for difficulty. Multiple times throughout the game, you'll encounter moments where it will feel as if the developers specifically put something in the game just to say to themselves, wow, that's really hard. Thankfully, Nioh doesn't reach Dark Souls 2 levels of absurdly unenjoyable difficulty spikes, but there were still enough moments for me to make a note of it. Another issue I found with Nioh was its awful UI. Usually I'd be able to overlook something like this, but honestly, with the amount of gear and inventory management I had to do, it was seriously hampering. Having to scroll through 10 or 20 individual pieces of gear for every single individual slot got old after about the 48th time doing it. This is without even getting into the blacksmith, which is some of the most unnecessarily bloated menuing I've had to do in quite some time. Having to manage 6 or 7 different menus with tons of different individual submenus and items was mind-numbing. Sure, I got used to it eventually, but a player shouldn't feel a slight sense of dread whenever they have to go to the blacksmith after a mission. The UI is pretty awful, but once you get used to it, it'll be more of an annoyance than anything else. Really, that's it though. Nioh was honestly just an enjoyable experience, front to back. Sure, it's an outright clone of a Souls game, but that's not an inherently bad thing. Nioh went one step further than other developers in ensuring that their games expanded upon previous ideas instead of just copying them. If Nioh was just Dark Souls 4 Weeaboo Gaijin edition, then I probably wouldn't have even finished it. Yet, thanks to Team Ninja's ability to make Nioh stand out from other Souls clones, I'm here talking to you all after thoroughly enjoying my time spent with this game. Overall, Nioh is a 5 out of 5. This game takes a solid foundation and builds upon it with its own incredibly unique ideas that help it stand out from the crowd. Sure, there are some unfair moments and the game is bogged down with an awful UI, but that didn't stop me from loving every second I spent cutting down yokai and fighting ancient Japanese warlords.